Welcome back to the shop, everyone. We're continuing on with this white oak island build. So last time we made the end panels for the cabinetry unit, and today I'm going to get started working on the, let's call it the leg assembly. So here is the overall design of the leg assembly. So we have some chunky leg things and then some rails with some slats. And we have this diamond cutout detail, which is a theme throughout the kitchen in a few places. You can see them back there on the doors for the sink base, and back here on the refrigerator. And further on the plans, the architects did supply me with a little more of a breakdown of the components, the sizes and everything. So this is what we're going to be basing this build off of. So the first thing that I'm going to need, I'm going to start looking for, is going to be the uprights. You can see they have this radius detail here. It's at 2.5 inches, and then it starts out down here at 4. So our total blank width is going to be 6.5 inches wide before we remove this whole section. So I need two pieces that are 6.5 inches wide. And then for the thickness, you can see that over here, that leg is going to be 3 inches thick at its final dimension. And then for the total height, since I have been scribing everything to the floor, I'm going to add my 1/2 inch to the bottom for my scribe. And I'll just extend that a little bit, and we'll chop that down when we actually set it in place. So that's just a pretty general idea of what we're looking to do here. We have to go find that stock, so off to the barn. So this is the only chunk of white oak that I have that is going to be thick enough. It's a piece of 16/4, and this came from the base of the same tree that gave us the slabs for the end panels. And I didn't get into it last time, but one thing I forgot to mention was this idea that I've been so spoiled lately, or for like the last decade, being able to source all my material from one tree allows everything to kind of match and be uniform as far as the grain and the color goes. And when I made the slats, those all came from like a couple different trees, and they definitely don't match. So I really want to use the same wood throughout this time. Especially because this is going to be even more visible than the panels we made last time. This is like the focal point of the room. You see this thing as you come into the room from the sunroom, and it has the most amount of space around it, so you'll see a lot of it. Here's the thing though. This was supposed to be walnut originally. So 6 months ago, I brought some walnut in, and it's been sitting here. That's been drying okay. It's been a month since the decision on the material changed, so I pulled this in here a month ago. It was air drying outside for 3.5 years. It's been in here for a month, and I already know this is not dry enough. That's the downside to the direction I'm going right now. And of course, I have two options. I can use a single piece like this, or I can do a glue up and have a seam that I have to try and hide, which I can do, but I prefer to not do. I'm going to take one piece at probably like 4 inches thick, and I'll have that in case I need any leg stock or thicker material that goes along with this wood. Not a whole lot of crazy things going on this side. The other side of the slab will be a little more on the interesting side, but this will be handy in case I need any thick stuff, you know, table bases or what have you. So this thing is currently reading at 9%, but keep in mind with these pinless meters and even the pin meters, this one specifically only reads to 3/4 of an inch deep, and this is going to give you an average of what's in that material 3/4 of an inch down and up. The pin meters, if you have the one that just has the pins on it and you go like that, that only reads as deep as you stick the pins. So if you can only get the pins, like this is white oak, if you have a pin meter like that with the pins on it, on the actual meter, good luck getting those pins very deep. So you're taking like an absolute surface reading, which is going to be the driest part of the wood. If you want to get an accurate reading, you need to know what's happening in the core. The only way to do that with one of these is to cut the wood and open up an area in the core. And the other way would be to use a pin meter that actually has a driver where the pins are separate from the actual box thing, and the pins have a slide hammer on them, so you can actually drive the pins into the core, in this case 2 inches deep into the wood, and get a true reading at the core. I've been doing this enough, and I kind of know, I have a good feeling for where things are at, and this one's going to have a pretty wet core. I'm hoping it's not super wet, but we'll see when we get into it. If it is too wet, we'll go the glue up route, and we'll abandon this, and these can be used for something else in the future. Now regardless, this is still going to be like more wet than I'd like, but I don't really have the time to wait. So if anything, I'll have to plan for a bit of shrinking. But again, in this case, it's a leg. It's not like it's a whole panel or, I don't know, a case side or something. So I'm much less worried about using something that's not dry enough to actually use in an application like this. I'd say it's probably like right on the edge. Yeah, 15%. I think we'll go for it. This is so close. I can always start over. Let's take this chunk to the shop. Okay, we have one problem that I have to deal with, but one other thing I thought I'd mention too while we have this here is you can see all of these cracks and checks along the surface that come into the core area. This dried too fast. And that's what this tells me, is that the core was still wet, the surface was drying faster, shrinking, the core won't compress, and then you end up with splits. So the drying rate exceeded the maximum speed limit of drying, because once you get too fast of a speed, then you exceed the strength, the tensile strength of the wood, and you start getting splits. And that's just another reason why like 16-quarter white oak, or like most any species, isn't super common, because it's difficult to dry, especially white oak. It's very fickle, and if you exceed that speed limit, even just a little bit, it has a pretty low speed limit to begin with, but if you exceed it a little bit, you get all this surface checking, which I'll just fill a lot of that with epoxy, and we'll probably be through a lot of it during the surfacing. But I think this illustrates one fun point that I've always kind of made about wood drying, is that drying wood is not linear. A piece of wood that's 2 inches thick doesn't dry like half as fast as a piece that's 1 inch thick. It's more like 2.5 times. Drying wood is exponential. Exponential regression, I guess. Anyway, back to the actual problem that I have to deal with, is that just like on the frame parts, I want to have more of a straight grain rift sawn sort of look. And as you can see, because this came from the outside of the tree, we're very well plane sawn all the way through here. We do dip a little bit into rift sawn towards the edge though. So on this one, if I just took my leg blank from like right here, we have like perfectly plane sawn stock. So we'll have cathedrals on the face, and we'll have perfectly quarter sawn stock on the edge. So we'll have ray fleck along the edge. Both of those looks aren't necessarily what I'm looking for. So this is another thing we talked about before, is because I have more thickness. This is 4 inches thick. I only need 3 inches to finish. There's my sort of finished piece, so I can get, if I just laid it in there and I just planed it exactly as it is, that's the orientation I would have for my growth rings. But because I have the thickness, I can rotate it like this in the thickness, and I can get those growth rings a little bit more on a bias, so they won't necessarily be exactly this. I can come over here and I can get probably even better, because the growth rings are starting to curve. Since this is the only piece of wood I have is thick enough, I'm going to have to kind of make do, and hopefully I can get this to look somewhat like the other ones and have that more straight grain look, at least on one face and one edge that you're going to see. The other thing to keep in mind too is that we're going to be removing a good chunk of this, because the only area that's a full width is right at the top. Down at the bottom, we'll have a 4-inch post. So if you plan for one side to have some nice roof sun orientation, but the other side is starting to get into more of a plain sun orientation like this, doesn't really matter because this leg blank is going to end back in here and only be this much. So I'm going to try and concern myself with creating a 4-inch square post or a 3x4 post. That's kind of the best look, and not really worrying about what's going on towards the edge, because the 2.5 inches is going to be removed when we add that shape to it. So the general plan here is that these are actually pretty darn flat already, so I'm not going to worry too much about jointing them. I'm going to put a straight edge here along the live edge, and then come over and make a blank that's like extra wide, and then we'll run it through the planer on an angle to start creating that taper. These sticks will allow me to run these boards through the planer at an angle and create that taper thing in there. You could resaw it at that angle, but I just think it's easier just to plane it off, because I'm not going to do anything with that offcut anyway. And as I've been cutting through these, I've been checking all of these offcuts to see where they're at as we get more and more into the slab. And they're reading more like, that one's kind of all over the place, 10. I think 10s, or there's an 11 down here, so I feel a little more comfortable with where this is at. Still got some drying to do, but it shouldn't like shrink up and go too crazy as it continues to dry out. This one's a 6 and 7, 11. Again, this is towards the outside. We got the live edge over there, and this is the furthest in that I have that I can test. It's reading at 7, 9, and 8. So I feel more comfortable with that. And this one, I'll tell you the equilibrium moisture content. So just to give us an idea, it's probably like 5 right now. Yep. Because we're just coming out of winter here. So 5% is what these would be at if they were perfectly at equilibrium. We have really dry winters here, so equilibrium moisture content in the middle of winter is typically 4 or less, because the indoor humidity is like 10 to 15%. I think it's like 20 right now. We're getting up into that area, so these will still have a ways to dry out as we go into next season, but since we're going into summer, equilibrium moisture content will come up to like 7, 8%. So they'll kind of like be kind of chilling, and then next winter they'll really start dropping off. But I feel good. It's good enough. Good enough for a big block of wood like this. I'm at 3 3/8 inches thick, and I'm going to pause here because I expect these to distort a little bit, since we definitely disturbed a lot of material on one side versus the other, and I haven't jointed these flat yet. I just ran them through as they were, so that'll give me some material to remove. I can also fill all this stuff with epoxy, and take care of that now. As we go deeper, these cracks get closer together, so I expect that you'll still see them, which I'm not too thrilled about, but they'll be a lot more minor, and they'll probably blend in a little better with the grain by the time we get down to final thickness. The one thing I wanted to show here is it's very apparent with the moisture meter. You can see the moisture gradient as you go from something that used to be over an inch deep into the wood, right here. This used to be an inch into the surface, versus over here, which is right at the surface. We can see the difference as we go across the board. So if you start over here, this was the deepest area of the slab. So that's at 11, that was an inch down from the surface. And if you go over here, which is just a hair below the surface, you can see it start creeping down until we get towards the very outside, which is right by the surface, and that's reading at 6. It's a kind of a fun example of actually being able to see that moisture gradient as you go across the board. Normally it's kind of hard to do because you have to go down the thickness, but that's kind of what we did here, but it's on a ramp. So all wood is going to have that differential in it. That's how wood works. It's either going to be drier in the core and wetter on the surface, depending on the seasonal changes. We're most used to it as we're talking about drying wood, where we go from dry to wet in the core. But the opposite is true, that once you get down to, like, if I had this all the way down to equilibrium at like 4%, and then the seasons change, then the outside will start hydrating until it travels all the way to the core and hydrates that as well. So there's always a lag. There's this differential from the surface to the core. That's why it's, when you're doing like moisture testing, you have to kind of know what this thing is telling you, regardless of what style of meter you have. Anywho, I'm going to do some epoxy stuff on here, let these sit over the weekend, and we'll see how they look. Okay, while those are doing epoxy stuff, let's work on getting the 2 rails. So I have this left over from last time for making the end panels, and this will give us our rail stock. So this one has this kind of sunburst pattern thing coming out from this knot, which I think I might actually want to include. This could be kind of a fun little detail in here, and the green kind of swoops around because of this knot. So I think we'll go ahead and include it. These are going to rough out at 3 feet long, and they're going to finish at 3 inches. So I need like 7 inches or so. So I'll be able to avoid this knot, get some of this fun, medullary ray action. It's quarter-sawn ray action. It's the quarter-sawn medullary rays, but they're kind of skinny little bands, so they don't look as like ridiculous as those big chunky things that you would otherwise see. Something more like this, where they're like huge and weird and chunky. Actually, these are kind of small too, but that's the best example I have in the scrap pile. Okay, there are the pieces of rail stock, And I did adjust the grain on this a little bit. I tilted them a little bit because the top edge of the bottom rail, which you'll see, it was a little bit too squirrely, kind of more like this one. So I adjusted the angle on the face a little bit to get a little more of a straighter look on there. It's not like perfect, but it's better than what it was. So those are all set to go. They're going to be, continuous. So this cool like arch detail here will be, up there. So 2 rails will be cut from the same board in a continuous grain, which no one will notice but me, but it'll make me happy every time I see it. So now while we're still looking for stock, let's figure out what we're going to do with these slats here. So I want to do some kind of symmetry because we're going to have the symmetry of this diamond detail thing in the middle. So I want to play with the symmetry of the grain here. So there's a couple things you could do with book matching, for instance. You could book match these 2 boards together, and then you could book match these 2 outsides together, so you have kind of like this symmetry mirror image kind of thing going on. You could also like book match just these 2 and book match these 2. That also creates some symmetry, but I really want some symmetry down the center line. So what I think I'm going to do is have these 2 boards be book matched, and then the transition from this board to this board will be continuous grain. So technically the book match is, this is book matched to this and that's book matched to that. So if you think about it like this, we're going to get a big block of wood that is thick enough for 2 pieces. We'll resaw it in half and open it up. That'll be the center seam, and then we'll rip the boards apart. So that gives us 4 pieces that are book matched in the middle and continuous grain, and technically book matched all the way across. So from my offcuts, I have this guy, which could work. We can take a look at this and see if that's going to do what I want. So I need a blank that's going to be 28 inches long. So if I were to use this, it would be either cut here and include these smaller knots and this big knot, or cut this way and include just this big knot in the corner. And what I like about this is that we go from this kind of plain sawn, this is like the center line of the slab, in line with where the pith is, wherever it would have been, over here somewhere. So you have this transition from cathedrals to rift to slightly quarter sawn with a small ray flex, and then fully quarter sawn with a big ray flex. I kind of like that, I kind of don't. I don't know if I like those big giant ray flex that much on here. The other sort of not great thing about this is this big knot here is actually traveling that way. So it gets more severe the deeper we go, because if you think about cutting this thing in half, we're going to have a combination of what's happening on this face and what's happening on the other face, because we're going to be looking at the inside. That face we just saw would end up being the outside, or sorry, the inside of the panel. Both the faces here are not the show sides. We have to kind of like visualize and mentally try to figure out what would be happening halfway between this and what's happening on the other side. So this one's cool. I would like, it's got a lot of cool figure and stuff. I like this a lot, but the knot gets kind of big, and it's not really the look that I'm going for with this one. You can see we'd have this weird knot thing in the corner. So I don't know how I totally feel about this. Kind of an option. I like the figure. I like this kind of weird looking stuff over here. And one thing I think will be cool is you'll be able to see this kind of like weird, whatever this is, this transverse knot. You'll be able to see that kind of coming across on both sides. So I think conceptually this is going to be a cool mirror image. I just don't know if this is the right piece for that. And here's the great thing about all of this is I don't even have to like go out to the barn and take this off the rack and look at all the slabs. I can just go and scrub through the video and see what the rest of the slabs in the log look like. So I think this would be kind of cool, like a section down here somewhere, but this one isn't wide enough to put the split down the middle. This would be like if you were to use from bark to bark for the panels. I really like the idea of having this like almost pith line through the middle of where those diamonds are. So I need to find a piece in here that's, you know, at least 24 inches wide so I can split it down the middle and use one side or the other. This is one of the slabs that we already used. So I think is going to be the issue is that I'm going to get to pieces that are going to be wide enough to work, but then they're going to be perfectly quarter sawn. Like this one would work, but it's so quarter sawn and you don't have much plain sawn to kind of look at. So I think if we can get down and look at something down in this range down there, that might be more in line with what I'm looking for. So a slab here in the video, this is this. So it actually is kind of nice because I can actually look at the video. I can see what it is going to be. Like this little bit of figure that I like over here. I can see that banded figure right here on screen. So I have a really good idea of what this will look like with finish on it because I have it wet. It doesn't look that bad actually. The Rayfleck gets pretty extreme towards the outside, but I was planning on removing all the sapwood anyway. So this might still actually be a contender, but you can see how straight this is. I want a little more cathedral action in here before transitioning into straight grain. This is going to be really, when this is cut apart into two boards, it's going to just read like all straight grain. I want a little bit of a gradient in the pair of boards. Slab 3 might work. I don't know if this is going to be wide enough or if it's going to be better than this. This one's starting to look better. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Let's go out and look at slab 3 and see if that seems to have any promise. So here's that first one, the first slab. And this section here would work okay if I wasn't trying to get that like symmetrical thing going. This is not quite wide enough. Otherwise it would work out really nicely. If I didn't care about having the cathedrals being at right at the seam between the two center boards, I could start over here and just have this kind of weird cathedral thing going on and then the straight grain. But I have this idea in my head and I'd like to pursue it if I can. This is definitely wide enough. I don't know if it's quite the look though. It looks kind of boring if I just take this section down here. There's not that much going on. This side's got all kinds of figure and stuff. Yeah, there's some kind of fun little burl things going on here. That's kind of nice. Okay, so I guess it feels kind of weird just be like, okay, let's give me the center section of this thing. I don't know. Don't know. I mean, it's a nice piece of wood. That's for sure. So I have given this quite a bit of thought. It's Tuesday now. It was Friday before. So I've been thinking about this all weekend. I procrastinated yesterday and worked on trim for the kitchen instead of doing this. And what I've decided is that I'm going to go ahead and cut this thing up and see how it looks. And if I don't like it, I can always go cut up another slab. But since I already have this section here, I might as well see how it is. And if I don't like it, it can become drawer parts. Now, one thing I did to make this maybe a little bit easier for me is I went ahead and I gave this thing a quick sanding. And then I've been putting some mineral spirits on just to kind of get an idea of what's it's going to be looking like. And I think down here, we got a little bit kind of like smaller, narrow Rayfleck. The stuff up here gets like super big, and I'm not really into that. So I think this section here, we got some fun, like kind of curvy Rayfleck through here. We'll have the figure from this knot, and this is the more knotty side. The other side is actually better. And again, we're going to have a combination of both sides. you know, somewhere between the two is where we're going to end up at. So I've been playing around with what orientation I want, and I'm thinking that we're just going to go ahead and then see how this kind of works out. We'll have, yeah, see, look, the Rayfleck on this side is like way huge. So we'll have something between this and a little more not so huge Rayfleck on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and start getting this thing cut up, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, let's get a feel for how this is going to look. Okay, that's how they go. So this goes here, and this goes here. It's okay. I think it might work. This is a little bit too like horns. It might be okay, because these are oversized still. Let's see. So some more of this knot's going to come out, or can come out. I think it might be okay, because then the diamonds are centered though, so I don't know. I'm going to go have lunch and think about this. Okay, I'm back from lunch, and I think this is still like a really big maybe. So I got my diamonds here all cut out so I can get a better feeling of how things can kind of work out. The only way I could make this work and not look weird would be to put that knot inside of one of the diamonds and cut it out. And I don't know how I feel about this quite yet either. So, and then this is still oversized, so that diamond cutout is going to be back in here somewhere. So it might work out okay. I don't know. I think it might be, it's going to be cool. I don't know if it's quite the right look that we're going to go for, that kind of meshes with everything else in the kitchen. But what I'm going to do is just move forward with this, see where it ends up. If I don't like it, I can always just go get another chunk and do this again. So now after all of that decision making and green selection and wood selection and everything, we're finally ready to actually start making something. So here's my blocks for my legs. We're going to go ahead and get these milled down to final dimension. And I believe the rails are already to final dimension too. So we'll get these chunks of leg stock milled up, cut to length, and then we will cut the mortises into them to receive the rails. In the last episode, I used a mortiser to cut the mortises, and I guess I kind of forgot or didn't realize that a lot of people hadn't really seen one of these before, which is just seems kind of odd to me because the square chisel mortise has been like, it was the first way I ever cut a mortise. I did it with this drill press and the mortising attachment for it, and that it was a whole adventure in itself, a story for a different day. But I thought I would just show a little bit closer look at the chisels and answer some of the questions that some of you had. So the mortiser bit is two pieces. It's an auger and a chisel. and these work in tandem to do two operations at once. So the whole mortising operation at the mortiser is very similar to the manual way you might drill or create a mortise by drilling a bunch of holes and then coming back with a chisel and chopping it all nice and even and square and in a line all nice. This just does both those steps at the same time. So the auger is held ahead of the chisel a little bit. I'll exaggerate it here for you. So you're drilling a hole into the wood, and then as you are pressing it in, the chisel is actually squaring it up and pushing the material into the middle where the auger is chilling there, and the bits here will actually shear the material off and pull it out. So the difference is that if you're going to do it manually, you'd be doing one of these, hitting a chisel with this. In this instance, this is this big giant lever forcing it down into the actual workpiece. So that's kind of how the mortiser works in a nutshell. The way that thing is set up, the auger is set past the end of the bit, and that allows the hole to be drilled ahead of the chisel actually squaring it up. So we're going to do 3/4 mortises again, but there's a problem. There's always a problem. There's always something. This chisel is all the way up, and my workpiece is so tall that I can't get it underneath my chisel. So for that, they make a riser block, which I don't know if I feel like doing or dealing with right now. But this block here, just like on a 14-inch bandsaw, this riser block just goes between the base and the, I don't know, the column, I guess you can call it. So back here, there's 4 bolts, and that holds the column with the motor and everything down to this base plate. And you just stick this thing in between them, and you got some longer bolts that you use instead, and that gives you an extra 2 inches, and that's actually not going to be even enough. So I'll have to find some other way to make these mortises, which is fine. I'm kind of glad that it doesn't work out, because this is heavy and bulky and ridiculous, and at least nowadays I would just use a forklift or a skid steer to sling the whole head and pick it up. I didn't have that back in the day. I've had this mortiser now for 14 years, and I got this like almost right away. I don't know how, I know how I did it. You don't want to know how I did it. Picking this thing up, holding it in the air, and sliding this thing in here and bolting it down. Yeah, it was a little different times back then. I don't really have much interest in dealing with this right now. So we're going to cut these mortises with the router, which is fine. We'll just have round mortises, or round end mortises. Not a big deal. And I'm also just going to come through with the drill and just remove a good bulk of the waste. That's going to be especially helpful with the router. We're going to be going down 2 inches. Wouldn't be all that big of a deal if you're only doing like a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch deep mortise, but 2 inches deep, having the extra material out of the way makes the routing a lot easier. And if your bit's getting a little tired like mine is, this is going to make it even easier than just trying to go in there just with the bit, the router bit, not the drill bit. So there's the mortises, and something I do for the setup here is I always put my bit on the far side of the fence. So if I'm referencing off this face, I'd be aligned to this side of the mortise, not this side. Because on this side, if the fence pulls away from the workpiece, that just pulls the bit out into the middle here, versus if you're over here and you pull away, you're going to go into your keep area. So I'm always on the opposite face, or the opposite line, closest to the fence. That's why it's coming in from both sides. Okay. There's the frame. It's chunky. Okay, I guess we'll deal with the slats now. That design is kind of growing on me. It's not too bad. I think it might actually work to have the knot in that top diamond. It might look okay. While I'm procrastinating on that even more, I'm gonna get the mortises cut for all these slats. So we'll start laying that out and getting this all figured out. There's my center line. Let's see. Let's just start the first slat. That's the end of it. Like maybe do like a 1/2 inch shoulder on every end, or on each end, something like that. So that's our mortise start and stop points for that one. Mortise somewhere in there. I think I have procrastinated enough now. I guess we will make those slats go in here and see how it's actually gonna look. So I was reading the comments on the last episode on the end panels, and it seems like folks really like the a little more detail, especially when it comes to working with the grain and grain selection and everything. So hopefully you've been enjoying this one, because we're kind of doing the same thing except with some slightly different concepts, and even bringing in a bit of wood drawing and that stuff. So I thought I'd mention, as I'm doing these last few ones, that if you really like that level of detail and you want to learn more from me, you can always check out my classes. Those are over at twwguild.com. If you click on courses, that'll bring up all the courses that are available in the guild for myself, as well as all the other instructors. And if you just want to see the ones that I've done, all 9 of them, you can use the drop down up top and select my name, and that'll show you my 9. And if you're looking for more on the whole going from slab to finished furniture pieces, I'd recommend the sideboard class. That one starts out with the slab and turns into a shaker-inspired sideboard, which I'm pretty fond of. But generally, all of the classes that I have done, they all sort of follow along the whole thought process of selection of grain and laying out your parts. And I bring that mentality, or the whole theme of the grain and the wood, the whole wood grain composition through the entire project from beginning to end. And it's definitely a big focus of my teaching, is laying out your parts and just having a more overall visually pleasing, more composed grain composition. So things seem a little more thought out and put together, I guess. So that's my self-promotion plug for today. Here's the dry assembly. Ugh. It is quite the beefy leg assembly. I think I like it. It's looking pretty good. I still don't quite know what I'm going to do here, but we'll deal with that after one more step. Let's do the cutouts here for the legs so we get a final feel for the overall, size and scale of everything, and then we can make a decision on the slats and the diamonds and all of that. So I'm going to make a template for this thing next. And just going back to the drawing for a second, really we have a quarter circle here, and that's about it. Everything else is referenced off of this 2.5-inch radius. So we'll drill a 5-inch hole here, and we'll make our 2 straight pieces on the template, and that will be that. Everything's based off of that one radius. Okay, with these legs cut down and shaped and everything, that actually makes it look quite a bit better. It gives it a much nice light, kind of a lighter look, good feel. And the only thing left is what I've been procrastinating. It's going to be these diamonds, but I can procrastinate a little more because I have to make a template first. So let's make a diamond template. So just like drywall, some paper on both sides with a bunch of little pieces. And this is actually pretty rigid and definitely going to be strong enough for a router template. So I'm going to get these old marks off of here and reposition this new one. Try and get it kind of centered on that knot. And I think I'll remove a lot of the waste first and then use the router to do the rest of the cleanup work. Of course, these are some pretty tight corners and everything, so the router is not going to get everything. So there's going to be a good amount of corner square up cleanup work to do afterwards as well. So we're gonna go for it, and hopefully it works. Although it's definitely growing on me, this green pattern with these diamonds. I think it's actually going to work out okay, or maybe even really well. Those cutouts still need quite a bit of cleanup, but I wanted to put it together and get a feel for how it's going to be. And I like this. This is not what I had in mind originally, but I think that the green kind of looping around here and this not being part of that top diamond, I think it worked out really nicely. And I actually really, really like these cutouts. For some reason, these just look so cool in person with all that depth in there. It's definitely coming together. So that's where I'm going to leave this one. We have our leg assembly all complete and ready to go. Next time we'll start making all the pieces that connect the end panel, and leg, and make the whole, island assembly thing. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the island leg, the island, anything in the house or whatever, just, like always, just ask me whatever you want. Please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.